We should be live now. It's TMP as usual. We're finishing up Dragon Quest tonight.
Yes, it is in fact not just TMP, it is the Mystery and Exdeff show again.
Yes. A return to form, you could say.
Yeah.
So yes, I grinded off screen to level 20. The speed run, like we said, using the name Zed, finishes the game at level 18. It seemed unrealistic for me to be able to win at that level. I grinded at level 19, I got like 2 more attack or something, so that didn't seem very impactful, so I went for 20. And I tested it, and it looks like it'll work fine.
Cool.
Yes, and like our guest said last night, I didn't know this, but this is actually not a vanilla ROM. It has at least visual changes. I think it is only visual changes, but it's basically a different tile set for the mountains and the towns and the water and forests. I think it's like the same otherwise, though. And all this time, I thought this was what the game normally looked like.
Secret HD texture pack. All right.
Yes.
Is it so? Are there still visual changes between the American release and the Japanese, or are all the visual changes just because of this like texture pack?
There are differences. So,
okay.
Just like in this version, the American version did have like the ability to move in 4 different directions, whereas the Japanese version did still have that sliding around, you know, always facing forward thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and actually, the way this emulator works is that when you select a ROM, you're given multiple options, or at least with the one I had here. So this, like, near vanilla one was there, and I also just had the Japanese version and a bunch of ROM hacks as well, which I didn't realize. So they're not really labeled, though. They're just as Dragon Warrior U, and then I clicked on a bunch of different ones. So one of them was like a nude mod sort of thing.
Okay.
There was a Final Fantasy mod where you were playing as a Chocobo instead of the DQ hero.
Fun.
Yes. Oh yes, and I also checked out the Randomizer, which was more interesting than I thought it would be, actually. It changes, like, the world map, so it doesn't just change, like, what item locations are where, like, some, you know, randomizers of games like Super Metroid do, as far as I know. It changes the map, it changes where you can run into like different enemy types. So you can like run into really hard ones really close to the start, which is sort of weird. And it also randomizes which abilities each enemy has. So.
Oh, that is actually pretty cool then. Okay.
Yes. The one I watched, for example, Scorpions had the ability to put you to sleep and stuff, which they don't have in the vanilla version of the game.
Gotcha.
But there were some that were maybe a little bit excessive, like any average enemy can end up having the final boss's fire breath, which just like one-shot you at the start of the game for a long time. So.
Well, that is really cool, yeah, because I thought it was just like changing the items around or whatever. It's like, well,
yeah,
I don't know, it doesn't seem that great, but if it changes the whole map, I can understand. That seems like a pretty cool speedrun.
That wouldn't be very interesting on its own, as far as I can tell, but I was watching like a race where 2 people had the same randomized seed and had to race each other.
Okay, I saw ones labeled as race, and I was just curious as to what that was. I could have guessed, but
yeah,
that makes sense. That's cool.
Yes, and it also, the stat gains and like levels that you learn each spell at were also randomized around. And they used the like remake experience levels for everything. So, which I looked into. Super Base said that it's like everything is roughly doubled, but some enemies it's more like tripled or even larger. So I looked at one, there's the Skeleton Knights or Wraith Knights in this version give like 27 experience. And they give, I think it increased to 72 in remakes, which makes, you know, reduces the amount of grinding significantly, but it's still probably a lot. Because like for the last couple levels I got to prepare for the final boss, I had to grind like I think it was like 3,000 or 4,000 experience off of enemies that give like 20 experience, so you can imagine that took a while. I took your recommendation and watched a couple episodes of the last podcast on the left while I was doing it.
Oh, okay. You should have told me because I would have recommended like better episodes to start with, but I'm curious because some of the earlier ones are fine. But which ones did you listen to?
I watched 2 of the most recent ones. The one's on Mike Hornke, who was this Christian charlatan, basically, who was operating in the 80s and was part of the Satanic Panic.
Okay. I haven't... okay, good. The latest, they get better as they go, usually, so... yeah, their first few ones can be rough. So I'm glad you went for the latest ones. So what did you think?
I thought it was interesting. It was a lot more informative than Come Town, which I think it kind of tends more towards what I am looking for in a podcast. Although I think of the two, I'd say Come Town was the funnier.
Okay. Yeah, like last podcast, that is one reason I like it, is because they really, really do a lot of research and that kind of thing. So it is actually informative. All right, cool. Glad you checked it out at least.
Yes, this Mike Hornke guy claims to have been a former Satanist. And so, of course, the podcast guys, being Satanists themselves, took issue with how he characterized the religion.
Yes.
But it was funny. I think it would have annoyed Wally because they talked about Satanists and kept using the term "we" to describe Satanism as a whole, as if like their behaviors are representative of all Satanists, which
sure,
you know, may or may not be. I criticized Christianity quite heavily, so it would have been interesting to see how you would have felt about.
Oh yeah, they all they've done other episodes. I find it interesting. They did one on like they did one on Jesus, which I was excited for because I wanted to see like, you know, them like just talk about all the like myths surrounding Jesus and like why it's fake, but it was really like just like it really felt like conspiracy theories, like as to why Jesus isn't real. Like I was expecting like better research stuff from that one actually.
Oh, okay.
It actually wasn't as interesting as I had hoped.
That's too bad.
So I was like, I want to see what these three like basically atheists but Satanists, tend to do really good research, like say about why Jesus isn't real, but it wasn't actually that good. But,
yes, well. I could tell that their Satanism was not based on genuine belief in Satan and was more of an ironic sort of thing.
Well, that's actually like Satanists. There are probably Satan worshippers. I mean, I'm sure there are, but like the actual the Church of Satan, which they would subscribe to, doesn't even believe in Satan. It's more of a religion of like respecting others and doing what you want without hurting other people.
Yeah.
Which is why they found it so attractive. But Satan himself is more like a figure of like representation of freedom rather than like an actual deity. Like atheists, Satanists are basically atheists.
Kind of like Marilyn Manson's philosophy as a religion, you could almost say.
Sure, yeah. Which is why it was appealing to them when they did the episode on it. They were like, "That actually sounds really great." Like, we'll all just convert. So.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So I showed the path that you had to take to pick up Erdrick's sword, which is the you know, your legendary ancestor's weapon that was It's hidden in the final boss area, which is kind of interesting. It evokes this idea that the Dragonlord was holding on to it to prevent it from being used against him.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a little treasure keep down here that I'm looking at now that we could go into, but there's really nothing special in it for being in the final room in the game. There's like some gold and a cursed belt that doesn't do anything, and I think an herb.
I kind of like that the sword is in the boss's area, because a lot of games it's like, you know, the ultimate weapon is just like hidden away, and it's like, well, if it's the only thing that can defeat this like all-powerful evil guy, why doesn't he just hold on to it, you know? It's like here it's like, well, he kind of did. So okay, fair enough.
Yes. And I guess he's also sort of has the armor guarded too, because we had to fight one of his minions to get it.
That's true.
But yes, okay, we found the big man himself, so let's go ahead and talk to him. He's the Dragonlord, King of Kings. Yes. So in this text, he offers us the ability to, like, join him and rule half the world, so let's say yes. And then he asks really. I remember that, but yes. Yes, but it's a trick, he just kills us. Yes, so as a fun fact, the game Dragon Quest Builders is based on this alternate timeline.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
Where the hero accepts this and dies, and the whole world is cast into darkness. But I'll just load a save state now that I've shown that off, and we'll fight him for real. Okay. After this random encounter spawns on the very last step. So yes, here's the Dragonlord. He looks kind of unremarkable.
Yeah. Even when you were approaching him, I was gonna ask, like, is that him? Because I wasn't sure. Just looks like an old man.
Yes. So he has a weak physical attack, and he can cast Stop spell, which are both useless, and he can also cast the spell Hurt More, which is what you don't want him to do.
Oh yeah. I'm guessing it's just the hurt spell, but more.
Yes. So the way that spell works is that it ignores the armor stat of the thing it's targeting and does a fixed range of damage.
Oh, you got him.
Yes. So now he's revealed his true form, as it is in this version.
Yes.
Yeah, so this boss is interesting because he's designed to basically be immune to both the hurt spell and sleep, so they each have a 1 in 16 chance of hitting him, which is the lowest possible chance, and renders them completely useless against him unless they are, unless you, like, RNG manipulate to get them to actually hit.
Sure.
Which has become, like, a completely standard way to approach final boss design in RPGs since then. Because, you know, it would be kind of lame or anticlimactic if you just, like, use an instant kill status effect or something on the final boss.
Yeah.
But in this specific case, it is a little unfortunate because the mechanics of this game are so basic that it turns it into a pure stat check fight, really.
Sure, that makes sense, yeah.
Where you just have to be high enough level to be able to beat him. It's mostly based around having this heal more spell. This is the only thing that can possibly, like, outpace his damage with the rate it heals at. So you just kind of have to do enough damage before you run out of MP to keep casting heal more. It depends. I think at this level, it's pretty reliable that I'll beat him, but maybe if I roll low damage every time, I'll lose. Because it looks like 6 to 12 damage or so with each attack, and he has 130 hit points.
Okay. Yeah, stat checks are never particularly interesting, but they are I don't mind them as a mechanic, especially like early on. I've talked about Underrail before, which is a post-apocalyptic. That's another one when I was ranting about how much I love Eastern European games. I forgot Underrail, so there's another one. There's like an area fairly early in the game that's like a build check, where it's like I say early in the game, it's like probably like 10 hours in, and it is very possible that you built your character wrong and just have to start over. And that's the area that kind of shows you that. I don't recommend against using a character build guide even on your first time, just so you can avoid that annoyance.
Temple at the very start of Fallout 2 is kind of a classic example of that too.
That one's the very first area, so
yeah, so it's a little better. But a lot of people also don't like that as a design choice. But I think like the purpose that it hypothetically serves is that you have to have like a certain amount in either unarmed, persuade, or pickpocket, I think it is, basically, to get through. So it's kind of like the game signaling that you need either combat skill or one of those two skills to be able to survive, really.
Sure.
But it's unfortunate that it's unarmed, because that's actually probably the least like practical combat skill to use in the whole game.
Yeah. But like Persuade is just such a useful skill that unless you're specifically building to not have it, like you should just go Persuade.
Yeah, definitely.
Fallout. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, well, we got him. We beat the Dragonlord, and we recovered the Ball of Light, which is basically the MacGuffin that's that we were trying to recover from the very start of the game. So now we can use this return spell that we got, which is like the wings, and it just brings you back to the castle. This would later be renamed to Zoom in all the other games.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I guess there's new dialogue here, at least from some characters, telling me to just go straight to the king, because I beat the game.
He's waiting. King Lordic.
I wonder if the non-guards will say that too. Yes, they do, okay. I assume everyone in the entire castle says that now, so I won't check out anyone else.
But how can you be sure? There he is.
Yes.
Dancing.
He's very pleased with my progress.
He is.
He wants me to rule over the land in his place. But we say no. And he wants to go found his own country instead.
Oh, okay. I thought it would give you a choice. No, okay.
Yes, and now the princess is coming and asking us to marry. to bring her with us. And of course, if we say no, she does not take no for an answer. She will repeat, "But thou must," until we finally say yes.
There it is. The moment we've been waiting for.
Yes. So of course you can go off on your own at the end if you just don't rescue her. That's, like I said, the Sigma male run of Dragon Quest.
Hey, right, yeah. Aren't we? You're carrying her too. How sweet.
Yes.
Yay. All right, Dragon Quest.
Yes.
What a legend.
Well, feel free to be as blunt as you want. What were your thoughts on Dragon Quest?
I mean, I think we had so much time to talk about it already, and nothing has changed in the entirety of the duration of the game to change my opinion. It's really old. I respect things it did for its time that you mentioned. I have zero interest in ever playing it. But you know what? I was pleasantly surprised by the fact that there is a dedicated speedrunning community, and the randomizer and all that actually seem interesting. So that's actually kind of cool. That's something I learned, and definitely a benefit of the game that I didn't expect. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's old. I'm glad you showed it to me because I thought Mother was old, but now compared to this, Mother is the first one's pretty innovative in a few different ways. Well, I know the later Dragon Quest games also innovate, but yeah, I can understand why Final Fantasy kind of blew this out of the water.
Yes, well, I'll definitely want to show off Final Fantasy 1 as well at some point so that we can make the comparison, because it's it's also very, very old now too, just like Mother 1. Any game on the NES, except for maybe like a couple Mario and Mega Man games, you can tell how old it is. But yes, my inclination is like I came into this kind of wanting to bash it, and so I felt a little bad when some of the like seemingly quite genuine Dragon Quest fans were coming in with their cute little emojis and stuff. But yes, my stance on the game is the same as yours for the most part, where it's like, in terms of actual entertainment value, playing the vanilla version of this game, at least today, is kind of excruciating. So I was actually thinking, like, as I was preparing for this last stream, like, why did I do this to myself? Why did I make myself play this game again?
So you could listen to podcasts. That's
yes. But at the end of the day, it's hard to really criticize it too much for that because of how purely old it is, and that is sort of what it functions as. It's like just sort of the baseline of what a JRPG is that other games could build upon. Although I think like it's interesting because the question for me is like, how far does that go? Because it's true that there aren't really any other games, or very few other games at least, that have a precedent for them to design it upon. But there are some things in this that feel like there's such obvious mistakes that like they should have known better. Even so, like I guess the biggest example of that is just how much experience it takes to level up compared to how much you get from the enemies. Like even the developers like implicitly admit that they got that way wrong for this version of the game, because every subsequent version of it like substantially increases those values.
That's a good point.
Yes. And so it's interesting to me because like that type of math in an RPG is definitely one of those things where the person who's responsible for it, their job is to make it so you as the player don't think about it. And for me, going back to the Dragon Quest series is really the first time I have noticed that type of thing enough to think about it and to appreciate how much fine-tuning probably goes into getting the math exactly right to make other RPGs like flow well. But that's because this series gets it so wrong so consistently, basically. Like that's my take, anyways. Is that even into the later games, that sort of stuff is not done very well in Dragon Quest generally. Like, takes too much experience to level up, and the encounter design is pretty lackluster, and so on.
Yeah, I gotta know. It's interesting. It's kind of these issues are actually amplified by the genre, I think, because if you play like an old like Wolfenstein 3D, like an old shooter, it's still like it's super old and basic, but it's still fun just because it's like constant action and like reflex check. I mean, you could play literally Pawn, right? Like Pong. I guess when I say it, it sounds like PAWN. Pawn.
Yeah.
One of the first games ever. or like a bunch of old like arcade games that require constant like input and reaction and reflex, and those are fun because they engage you more. Whereas here, because it's like turn-based combat and really grindy, like I know I don't like turn-based combat, but I'm not trying to say it's bad inherently, but like this game being old and basic and slow is kind of, all those issues kind of are amplified by the fact that it's also an RPG that doesn't require like, all those things I said, like reaction and reflex and that kind of thing, that can kind of keep you engaged even if the mechanics are super basic.
Yes, I think that is true, and I think maybe another comparison that kind of speaks to it is comparing this to the first Legend of Zelda, where,
Hmm.
like, both of them, I think the most interesting element of each is the sort of the, like, investigation aspect of it and, figuring out the somewhat obscure things you have to do, to get to the end. And so for me, I actually, like, was pleasantly surprised, I guess, revisiting the first Zelda and kind of think that it's, like, it's a game that's worth revisiting, I guess, on its own merits because they people don't really design adventure games quite like Zelda 1 anymore, basically because it is so obscure that it's kind of like, I don't know, for me it was an interesting challenge, I guess, to try and figure out like where to
Hmm.
go and what to do in that game. And so I tried to consciously avoid using a guide and found that engaging in a way, although I admit that like some parts of it are so obscure that I did end up having to use a guide for the last couple parts.
Sure, sure.
And but it's like I feel like Zelda 1, like Dragon Quest 1 kind of has a similar thing at its core, but Zelda 1 lets you get to that with much less hassle, I guess, and much less tedium because you don't have to grind. So, like, there are power-ups in that game that kind of control where you can go as a normal player, but theoretically you can beat the entire game with, like, really almost no power-ups and just the 3 hearts you start out with and everything.
Sure.
So,
Okay, that
yes.
makes sense.
But yes, I guess that's another thing that's interesting, or that maybe we'll have a more complete picture of once we go back to Final Fantasy 1 as well, because that game is also really old and an RPG, but like, and you're still right, I think, that its oldness as a problem is amplified by the genre in a similar way to this one, but I guess just a lot less, because
Hmm.
the the different choices it introduces and everything do lend a lot more strategic depth to it, so it feels a lot less like pure grinding and stat checks than this game does.
Sure.
And the same thing goes for Mother 1, I guess, although again, that's 3 years later, so it's a little unfair. Where, who you gave the Franklin badge to and how you approached the dungeons and everything could make a big difference compared to just grinding, or at least so I found. Like, I was
Yeah.
actually pleasantly surprised in that game by how manageable the final dungeon was, even at lower levels, because
Yeah.
you can like strategically use Ninten's ability to run away and have Anna defend so she can revive and stuff like that.
Yeah. Definitely.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Like Mother One, I think although it was like kind of basic and a little slow. I mean, at least for me, I didn't, it didn't seem very, very grindy, and it seemed like it had like a continuous story that kind of kept you engaged. This game, the story is so basic and that kind of thing that I feel like this game's like the gameplay kind of gets in the way of like if it, I'm glad they boosted the XP and gold gain before because it's like it really should just be kind of a short, simple, fun little game, but it like, drags itself out for so long that we have all these complaints.
yeah.
We have to keep saying like, "Oh, it's old," but like you're right. Like the devs basically admitted they fucked up because in later releases they fixed that XP and gold issues. So um, yeah, I think that's fair to say that is a definite downside of the game. So, but in the end,
Yes.
it's really like a product of its time more so. I won't say like it's a bad game. Like I don't think it's a bad game. It has a lot of flaws, but for its time and the legacy it has and the influence on JRPGs, even though there were better ones that came out like pretty shortly after, um, I respect it.
Yeah. I'm inclined to say the same, yes, and I guess to maybe turn around and say some good things about it. I do think the princess is funny, so like I can see why But Thou Must stuck with people because it is actually one of the few like funny parts of the game
Yeah.
that I do remember.
Yes.
And I guess I wanted to talk a little bit more about like how this game was designed in terms of being almost an investigative game where you're
Sure.
looking for, because like again, I think the sheer obscurity of it in theory is kind of cool, but I guess I just wish it. I guess it does take it too far. Like one moment I'm thinking of is how to get through the final dungeon, you have to like search behind the Dragonlord's fake throne. I think
Hmm.
like, and there's like a whole huge section of the dungeon that's just a complete red herring if you don't do that. Which I think, like in theory, that idea is really cool because it lets you feel like you're, discovering these obscure and secret treasures on your adventure. But at the same time, in practice, I think what happened with that design choice is that kids in the '80s all got stuck, and people now all just look it up in a guide. So there needed to be some degree more clues, I guess, to make it work right. And so the rest of the game kind of feels the same way, although that's like the probably the height of the like bullshit obscurity of it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's probably that. I think that about covers my thoughts on this game. So
Yeah.
this
I
was
think
going
that
to be
also.
a short one because we're feeling kind of tired. So we'll probably come
Yeah.
back. I think the schedule for TMP overall is tomorrow. There's another Splinter Cell stream, and then
I think that's correct. Actually, I was just looking at it and I forgot. Yes, we were originally gonna. I was originally gonna stream our next game, which would be Alien versus Predator 2. We had some questions about that. It's the 2001, 2001 for PC, 2002 for Mac game, and actually with the expansion, which I'll get into when I play it. I was gonna do that tonight, but yeah, I'm actually exhausted. So I know excuses, but I'm gonna call a rain check and we'll just come back with that next week. And yes, I think tomorrow it's Splinter Cell. And Hyper just joined like a couple minutes ago, and we are ending the stream.
yes,
So sorry, sorry.
thank you for showing your support. In any case, Hyper. But yes, we're going to be just about calling it. So yes, look forward to those games next week, and then even further down the line, I think I'll be doing the Play Dead Studios games, so Limbo and Inside,
Oh yeah, cool, cool.
and then
Excited
after
about
that, we'll probably continue this journey into JRPG history with either Dragon Quest V or maybe the first Final Fantasy, depending on how I'm feeling. So
All right, it's all the same to me.
yes, so look forward to that, and we'll see you later.
All right.